In this past week, we have seen some dangerous and some powerful dark forces at work in our world. And as we look towards the US in particular and other parts as well, we see it quite plainly. The disease of racism has been a disease that has plagued the earth since humankind first sought to dominate one another and seek wealth and prosperity over each other. I would also argue that as we sit here and as you listen to this, many of us, including myself, will have contracted this disease and almost be asymptomatic to others, yet deep within our hearts there is a stain. The call goes out to each one of us to search those hearts and understand where it has infected us. You don't need to be abusive to be a racist. You simply have to tolerate the intolerable, to remain silent and to deny that we ourselves are not part of the problem. Sometimes it's just about who we choose to allow speaking. We spent time today praying into this situation, and it's interesting that as this is all going on, we start to look at the new values for our church going forward. And the first value that we introduced and are talking about just now is worship, advancing upwards. And this is what it says: we advance for God and because of God. It's his kingdom reign we look to, his will that we seek, and therefore we advance upwards in worship and in adoration to the one who holds it all. What seems relevant to us just now is the context of the Bible passage we look to for guidance today. Jesus meets a woman at the well and asks for a drink, but it's not as simple as that. The Bible is quite clear in identifying this woman as a Samaritan woman. She's defined and she's set aside by her race. I think even using someone's race to describe someone is rooted in the disease of racism itself. It sets someone apart as if their colour and place of origin even matters. Why mention it? Location, culture, and skin pigment does not define the spirit of a person. You have to just look at Jesus, who was identified as a Galilean, and all the Pharisees had to say to that was, nothing good comes from Galilee. There you have it. They had written off the Messiah from the outset because of his race. There are many reasons why we set others apart and discriminate. The entire Samaritan population had been written off by the Jews as inferior, worthless, and excluded from God. One of the reasons for the divide was a huge disagreement over worship and the way it should be done. And we read of how Jesus tackles that fairly head on with the idea of true worship, breaking down the separation that racism had caused. So what is true worship? What is the purpose of worship in the first place? Well, worship, I would argue, is a journey, an access point to the Creator. And each of the stages of worship advances us towards God. And it starts with adoration and an expression of love and gratitude. Worship becomes the way in which we vocally express all that God has done for us. Many songs and words of scripture help us do that. And prayer itself also allows us to draw closer to that point of grateful adoration. At this stage, many of us would have different ways in which we do it. There's no doubt about it. I remember working for a Christian organisation made up of many different denominations. And the office manager there belonged to a denomination that sang only psalms without music and would consider anything else irreverent. I know that for some of you, on occasions, the songs that we choose to sing are either too modern, and for others they are too traditional. Some perhaps would rather not sing at all. And it's so easy at this stage to allow those things to divide. It's quite simple. But worship has to go further than just the utterance. Anyone can do that. And in fact, turn up to any church wedding or ceremony and you will see plenty people singing and saying the right words and then walking out with no intention on returning the following week. Is that worship? When it first became apparent to Sam, then to me, long story, that we were going to get together, in those early days, there was a lot of sharing words of adoration and affection. Naturally, in those early days of the relationship, as we worked out how life would look like and what each other liked and disliked, that communication was vital. The simple words of "I love you" were important. I needed to say them, she needed to say them. But in this relationship, like when it comes to worship, that had to develop further. If it didn't, then these words of affection would over time become just words that went no further. So as we became closer, as love for one another grew, there was then the next stage, surrender and alignment, where we would take into consideration the needs of the other, surrendering our own desires for some things and aligning ourselves to one another's desires. It's funny how we started to like what the other one liked. Our journey of worship develops to a new stage, when we begin to align ourselves to God's will and surrender our own. We begin to let go of the things that often separate us from one another. And that's important too. After his resurrection, Jesus approaches Simon Peter and asks him the question, "Do you love me?" Now, the stage 1 response comes back from Peter, "Yes, Lord, you know I love you." But Jesus wants a stage 2 response. Action. "Feed my sheep," he instructs. "Align yourself to my plan. Show me your love." I came across one definition of true worship as this: true worship is defined by the priority we place on who God is in our lives and where God is on our list of priorities. True worship is about our priority. Show me, God says, how much you really love me. It's not that God is insecure and needs to know. It's because we are often insecure, not properly founded and rooted in a true spirit of worship and adoration. And that is the final stage of worship, a connection with the Creator. That is why we worship and adore, why we align and surrender to him, because he made each one of us. There is only one Creator, and there is only one human race in which God created, loves, and reaches out to. Now, worship is not about what we sing. Worship's not about how we sing it, how we do it, the prayers we choose to say or not say. Culture has no relevance when it comes to true worship, because none of that defines our ultimate connection with the Father of all people and of all nature. And that brings us back to the well, with the woman who came from a different place, and Jesus, the one who is the only way to connect to our Creator. Jesus says to the woman, and through the scripture declares it to us all as well, "Believe me, woman, a time is coming when it will not matter where you worship or how you even do it." Jesus says the time is now, when worship is about our connection with the Creator. It is the thing that unites us together as one human race, connected to one Creator. No matter the colour of our skin, our background, or anything else for that matter, we all have a Creator, the same Creator God? How can we worship the Creator of all when within us there is even a hint of thought that another of God's created beings, out of his creative love, is inferior to us or in any way different? The further we progress in worship, the more we will understand that no matter who we are his marvellous masterpiece.